I still remember the exact sound the glove box made when I slid it open, a little sigh of plastic and hinges, like it was exhaling a secret it had been holding for years. It was a humid Thursday in late May, the kind of day that makes the city smell of hot pavement and blooming jasmine. I had gone into the car to grab a parking permit I thought I'd left on the passenger seat. Instead, my fingers brushed a folded envelope tucked under the manual, a receipt, a bank notice, and a photocopy of a check. The check was signed with her name. Her name. We'd been divorced 3 years, but some habits remain. I still remembered the curve of her signature, the small loop she always put at the end of her "Y." When I saw it there, everything redirected, like a train switching tracks. I sat down on the curb and unfolded the sputtering paper under the car's interior light, though it was broad daylight. The numbers were big. Bigger than anything she should have been signing. Her name was Laura. For a decade she'd been the face of the neighborhood charity we both helped found, soup kitchens, tutoring, the scholarship fund that paid for local kids to go to summer camp. Everyone loved Laura. She had that way of looking at people that made them feel seen. She led meetings, made speeches, stepped into pictures with donors. The idea that her handwriting, the same hand that used to scribble "milk" on grocery lists, could be attached to a check for $10,000 heading to a Shell account felt like being punched by a stranger. I didn't confront her. Not then. I put the paper back, closed the glove box, and drove home as if nothing had happened. It felt like the sensible thing to do. Anger without a plan is noise. I had spent the last 3 years learning that the hard way. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a single lamp and a pile of old receipts and bank statements spread like old maps. We had shared accounts for a while after the divorce, small practical things, like the landscaping contract or the school fundraiser checks for Lily, and Laura still had the knack of making volunteers and parents trust her implicitly. If anyone could attach her name to a check, we'd have to trace every paper trail to prove it wasn't a mistake or, worse, a framed job. I pulled out my laptop and dug. I called a friend who worked at the bank. I fumbled through polite questions, asking about transaction signatures without revealing too much. On the screen, little doors began to open. The $10,000 check wasn't alone. There were smaller transfers, staggered like stepping stones, all leading to the same dead-end vendor, Cedarwood Holdings. Nothing came up on a quick search. No website, no storefront, just a P.O. box in a neighboring county and a voicemail that answered with a recorded, "We'll get back to you." I felt that particular cold flip in my stomach, the kind of vertigo that comes before you finally accept there is no easy explanation. Laura had a secret. How long had she been carrying it? How many nights had she smiled at donors with a champagne flute in one hand while quietly signing away money that should have fed children? The next morning I called Mara, my sister. I told her the smallest version of the story, found something. Not sure. I'm quiet for now. She came over with coffee and a look that said she knew better than to pry. Don't go wild, she said, sitting down with her mug. Figure it out first. Then act. I should have called a lawyer. Instead, I called Dean, an old colleague who runs private investigations on the side. Dean knew how to move without alarm, how to trace an anonymous vendor, how to check corporate registrations, how to watch without being watched. He met me that afternoon in the strip mall behind the diner, his notepad already half filled with penciled numbers. "Shell companies smell like smoke," he said. "You don't find smoke for no reason. You follow the trail until you see the fire." We followed. We found Cedarwood Holdings registered under a woman's name in a state 2 drives away. The company had no employees listed and no physical office beyond a mail sorting facility. We found other little things, invoices without itemized services, payments routed through another shell in the Cayman accounts that a bank flagged as suspicious. Each new piece tightened the circle. Laura had been careful, but carelessness is part of every lie. Someone always leaves a breadcrumb. By the end of the week I had a folder thick enough to make me feel both bleak and strangely powerful. Photos of checks, bank statements, copies of emails that I'd saved from the charity's admin inbox. The more I held it, the more this stopped being about betrayal and started being about responsibility. If Laura had been stealing, and the evidence pointed that way, the victims would not just be me or the marriage we once had, they'd be the children, the families who lined up for food, the scholarship recipients who believed in the honesty of the fund. I could have made the loud choice. Expose her publicly, post the documents, watch the social media pile on, consume whatever image she'd built. That would have been satisfying in a primal way. But I had spent too much of my life in the theater of spectacle to be fooled into thinking spectacle equals justice. I wanted something cleaner. Something definitive. Something that healed rather than simply punished. So I started assembling a different kind of plan. First, I went legal. I found a lawyer named Sophia who knew family law and nonprofit oversight, and who could move deftly between civil filings and criminal referrals. Sophia heard me out without drama. If she's taking funds, the nonprofit is at risk, she said. We can file for a forensic audit and get temporary control of finances while the audit is performed. If criminal activity is found, we'll turn it over to the DA. Practical. Surgical. The kind of approach I wanted. Next, I secured evidence in a way that would hold up in court. Dean retrieved the original checks from the storage closet at the charity office, the ones Laura had used to reconcile monthly expenses, and made high-resolution scans. Sophia sent a carefully worded letter requesting immediate access to the charity's accounts for a third-party audit. It was the empty, bureaucratic voice of authority, cold, quietly devastating. But I knew the numbers alone wouldn't be enough for what I wanted to achieve. There was another layer, the human story. If I wanted to repair the damage, if I wanted the community to come back from the shock of betrayal, to keep trusting the institution we'd built, it would have to be more than arrests and news cycles. It would have to be accountability and restitution and a demonstration that truth could be used to create repair, not merely retribution. So I started talking to people. Not to gloat or gather gossip, but to prepare a way forward. I called Frank, who ran the after-school program and who had signed most of the checks Laura had approved. His voice, when I told him we needed to audit, was shocked but grateful. If she messed with the fund, I want to know, he said. I want the kids to get what's owed. I made a list, the families who would be affected, the donors who might pull out if the story turned ugly, the volunteers who had trusted Laura with their weekends and their hearts. I started drafting letters. Not with accusations but with promises. We are undertaking an independent audit. We will publish results. We will restore funds where we can. We will act transparently. That night, after a long day of meetings and clandestine coffee runs, I sat on the porch with the folder in my lap and watched Lily chase our old beagle around the yard. She was 8, and blissfully unaware that the foundations of her childhood were suddenly shaky. I promised myself, quietly, that whatever happened next would be on my watch to protect her and the others who couldn't understand the messy business of adults. I didn't know how the community would react. I only knew this, secrets had a way of growing until they were too big for one person to move. If Laura's secret had reached that size, it was my responsibility to make the first, right move. And I planned to do it in a way that left people speechless, not with vengeance, but with a kind of quiet, inexorable justice that would close doors and open better ones in their place. The next morning began with a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, Dean stood there with a stack of manila envelopes tucked under his arm. He had that look in his eyes, sharp, almost electric, like he'd found something that couldn't wait another hour. "Morning," he said. "Got you something." We spread the papers across my dining table. Bank trails, corporate filings, registered agents, Dean had been busy. What struck me wasn't just the money trail, but the frequency. Laura hadn't made a one-time mistake. This was systematic. Over 2 years, she had siphoned off close to $120,000 through Cedarwood Holdings. Always small chunks, always disguised as vendor payments, printing, catering, transportation. It hit me then, every time I'd attended a gala, smiled at the donors, and praised the programs, she'd been carving a hole in the foundation. Dean leaned back, sipping the coffee I handed him. She was smart about it, he said. Not greedy in one go. Death by 1,000 cuts. But the pattern's undeniable. I rubbed my temples, my thoughts racing. Why though? She wasn't struggling. She had the house, the car, her job. What could she possibly need this for? Dean shrugged. Secrets aren't always about money. Sometimes it's about control. Sometimes about someone else. That word, someone else, lingered like smoke. I decided to test the waters with Laura before anything official hit her doorstep. If she was hiding something, her reaction would say more than her words. That Friday, I arranged to drop off Lily at Laura's place. I timed it deliberately so we'd have a few minutes alone at the door. Laura opened it with her usual poised smile. At 39, she still had the effortless grace she'd always carried. Her eyes, though, had grown more cautious over the years, like she was perpetually waiting for a shoe to drop. We exchanged pleasantries, and when Lily ran inside to grab a forgotten toy, I lowered my voice. Laura, I came across something. A check. Signed by you. $10,000 to a vendor called Cedarwood Holdings. You know anything about that? The effect was immediate. Her smile faltered. For half a second her eyes widened, then she forced a laugh. Cedarwood? Must be one of the catering vendors. We go through so many. But I saw it, the tightness around her jaw, the way she shifted her weight. That was no casual answer. I nodded slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Maybe. Just thought I'd ask. Her relief was almost visible, like she believed she had successfully brushed it off. But the seed was planted. She knew I knew something. That night, I met with Sophia, the lawyer. She had already filed the audit request with the charities board under my name, framing it as a routine compliance measure. She slid a document across the table to me. This will freeze any large transfers until the audit is completed, she said. It buys us time. I signed it. With every stroke of the pen, I felt less like a man digging through his ex-wife's secrets and more like a custodian guarding something bigger than either of us. But part of me still wrestled with questions. Was Laura in over her head? Was she being manipulated by someone else? Or had she simply chosen deception as a way of life? Over the weekend, Dean gave me my first clue. He had traced some of Cedarwood's funds forward. Look at this, he said, sliding his laptop toward me. Wire transfers, consistent, every other month, into an account under the name Marcus Halloway. Recognize it? The name landed like a hammer. Marcus had been around during the last years of our marriage. He wasn't a friend exactly, more of a shadow at the edges, consultant, advisor, someone Laura always described as helpful with donors. I'd never liked him. Too slick, too careful with his words. And now, his name was on the account receiving the stolen money. I sat back, my chest tight. This wasn't just financial theft. This was personal. If Marcus was involved, and Laura was funneling money his way, then this secret wasn't about survival. It was about alliance. Dean whistled low. Think she's with him? I didn't answer. My mind replayed all the late nights she'd said she was working on grant applications, all the times she brushed off my questions about Marcus as paranoia. Suddenly the pieces aligned in a way I hadn't wanted them to. Sophia's plan became clearer now: gather evidence quietly, build a case strong enough that when Laura was confronted, there'd be no escape hatch. But I wanted more than legal victory. I wanted clarity. The kind that would rip the veil off whatever story she'd been spinning. So, I made a decision: I'd follow the money myself. Not just on paper, but physically. Dean and I staked out Cedarwood's mailing address one humid Tuesday evening. It was nothing glamorous, a bland P.O. box in a strip of mail services. We watched from across the street, the car engine idling. After an hour, a man in his early 40s pulled up in a silver sedan. Sharp suit, carefully groomed beard. Marcus. My stomach churned. We watched as he retrieved envelopes from the box, tucked them into a leather satchel, and walked back to his car. No hesitation, no concern, like he had been doing it for months. Dean snapped photos. Got him, he said under his breath. But for me, it wasn't the photos that mattered. It was the confirmation. My ex-wife's secret wasn't just numbers on a page, it had flesh and bone, it had a face I already knew. Over the following days, I wrestled with the next move. Expose them outright? Hand everything to the authorities and step back? Or confront Laura one final time, force her to choose whether she'd come clean or be dragged down by the evidence? The answer came from somewhere unexpected, Lily. One evening, as she drew pictures at the table, she looked up and asked innocently, "Daddy, why does Mommy have dinner with Mr. Marcus so much? He's always there when I visit." The world slowed. Dinner. So Marcus wasn't just a shadow partner in finances, he was inside her personal life too. She wasn't even trying to hide it from Lily. I tucked her into bed that night with a smile I didn't feel, and once she was asleep, I sat on the porch with the weight of it all pressing down. This was more than betrayal. It was exposure, vulnerability, the collapsing of everything I thought I understood about Laura. But something inside me hardened, too. If she thought this secret would reduce me to bitterness, she was wrong. If anything, it gave me a clarity I hadn't had since the divorce. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to rage. I was going to handle this in a way no one expected. And when I did, it wouldn't just reveal Laura's secret. It would leave everyone speechless. The decision to confront Laura wasn't simple. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, turning over every possibility in my mind. I could take the evidence straight to the board, hand it all to Sophia, and let the hammer fall. It would be clean, decisive, and she'd have no chance to twist the narrative. But there was another part of me, the part that had once loved her, the part that still saw Lily's mother in her, that wanted to give her one chance to explain. Not because I thought she deserved it, but because I needed to hear it from her lips. I wanted to see her face when she realized I knew everything. So, I planned it carefully. I invited Laura to meet me at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Neutral ground. Not her house, not mine, not the office. Just a small corner table by a window where I could look her in the eye without distractions. She showed up 10 minutes late, as always. Elegant as ever in a tailored beige coat and pearl earrings, her hair perfectly styled. She smiled when she spotted me, but her eyes flickered with something else, hesitation, maybe suspicion. "Thanks for meeting," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Of course," she replied, sliding into the chair opposite me. "You sounded serious." I leaned back, studying her. "I am. Laura, I know about Cedarwood Holdings. I know about the money. And I know about Marcus." Her face froze. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she gave a small laugh, soft and almost condescending. "You don't know what you're talking about." I didn't flinch. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside were printed bank statements, copies of checks, and photos of Marcus at the P.O. box. She didn't even open it. She just stared at it like it was a bomb. Finally, she whispered, "Who's helping you?" "That's not important," I said. "What matters is that I know. And so will the board soon. Unless you want to tell me why." For the first time in years, Laura's polished mask cracked. Her hands trembled as she reached for her coffee. She didn't drink it, just held the cup like a lifeline. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she said quietly. "At first, it was just temporary. Marcus said it was an opportunity, that no one would ever notice small amounts. We had plans, Anne. Plans. I cut in. Plans that required stealing from a charity for kids. That's not temporary, Laura. That's betrayal. Her eyes snapped up, sharp and defensive now. Don't act so righteous. You left me with nothing but scraps after the divorce. You think I didn't notice? You moved on with your life, while I had to rebuild mine from scratch. I shook my head. That's not true, and you know it. You had the house, the car, your job. You didn't need to do this. This isn't survival, it's greed. Or maybe it's about Marcus. She flinched at his name, and that was all the confirmation I needed. The silence between us stretched. She looked out the window, avoiding my gaze. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered Lily mentioning those dinners with Marcus, and the pity burned away. You know what's going to happen, right? I said evenly. The board will find out. The donors will find out. And when they do, your reputation will be in ruins. Unless you tell the truth now. Her lips tightened. And what if I don't? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Then I'll make sure the truth speaks for you. That was the moment her composure shattered. She shoved the envelope back toward me, her voice rising. You think you're better than me? You think you can sit there and judge me after everything? You don't know what it's like to feel invisible, to be discarded like trash. Heads turned from other tables. I kept my voice calm, controlled. This isn't about me. This is about you, and the choices you made. She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this, she hissed before storming out. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the untouched coffee in front of me. My hands were steady, but my chest felt hollow. It was done. She knew I knew. And from her reaction, I knew she wasn't going to stop on her own. The next day, Sophia called. The audit is moving forward, she said. By next week, they'll have enough to freeze the accounts completely. Laura will be cornered. I told her about the cafe meeting. She wasn't surprised. She'll lash out before she folds. Be ready. And Sophia was right. That weekend, I woke to a barrage of messages, emails, texts, even a voicemail, from Laura. Her tone swung wildly between pleading and threatening. Please, let's talk this out, for Lily's sake. You don't understand, Marcus is the one pulling the strings, I had no choice. If you ruin me, I'll take you down with me. I didn't respond. Every message only confirmed what I already knew, she was unraveling. By Sunday evening, I went to pick up Lily from her house. Marcus's car was parked in the driveway. When Laura opened the door, she looked exhausted, makeup smudged, hair slightly unkempt, eyes red from crying. She barely spoke as Lily hugged me and ran to the car. But as I turned to leave, Laura grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. We can make this go away. No one has to know. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I realized something. She wasn't just scared of losing her job or her reputation. She was scared of losing Marcus. And that, more than anything, told me what kind of secret I had stumbled into. I pulled my arm free. It's already too late, Laura. The truth is coming. And when it does, you'll see I didn't ruin you, you ruined yourself. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't stay to watch. I walked back to the car, Lily's laughter drifting from the back seat, and drove away. For the first time in months, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the tide had turned. Laura thought I would back down, stay silent, maybe even protect her. But I had something else in mind. Something that would leave everyone speechless. The following week felt like walking a tightrope. Every phone call, every email could have been the one that tipped things over the edge. Sophia kept me updated daily. The audit team had gone through nearly 3 years of records, and the discrepancies were glaring. By midweek, she told me, "It's undeniable now. The board can't ignore this. They'll convene on Friday." Friday. That word rattled around in my head like a countdown clock. In the meantime, Dean dug deeper into Marcus. He wasn't just siphoning money, he was investing it. Property, stocks, a shell company in another state. He was clever, spreading the funds across different channels, but Dean was cleverer. Each breadcrumb led to another, and soon the picture was clear: Marcus was using Laura to funnel cash into his own empire. When Dean showed me the documents, I felt a mix of anger and grim satisfaction. So she wasn't just doing this for herself, I muttered. No, Dean said. She was a pawn. But a willing pawn. That's the key. That night, I sat in my living room with the evidence spread out across the table. Lily was asleep upstairs, and the house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. I stared at Laura's handwriting on the checks, Marcus's name on the bank transfers, the photographs of them together. Once upon a time, I'd believed Laura was incapable of something like this. But now, the truth was undeniable. Still, I wasn't prepared for what happened on Thursday evening. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Marcus. His voice was smooth, confident, the same tone that had always rubbed me the wrong way. "You're making a mistake," he said. I stayed silent, letting him talk. "I know you think you've got something, but you're playing with fire. Laura's career, her reputation, fine. But if you drag me into this, you'll regret it. I have resources you can't imagine. Walk away, and I'll make sure you're taken care of." I almost laughed. Taken care of? You mean bribed? Call it what you want, he replied coolly. I'm offering you an out. For Lily's sake. You want her growing up with her parents in a public scandal? That hit a nerve, but I forced my voice to stay steady. Marcus, you've already made sure Lily will grow up knowing what betrayal looks like. The only difference is, she'll also know her father didn't stay silent. There was a pause on the other end. Then Marcus's voice hardened. Then don't say I didn't warn you. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand. For the first time in this whole ordeal, I felt a flicker of fear. Not for myself, but for Lily. If Marcus was desperate, what would he do next? The next morning, I doubled down. I drove straight to Sophia's office and told her about the call. She wasn't surprised. Men like Marcus always think intimidation works. We'll keep everything documented. If he tries anything, we'll use it against him. She leaned forward, her expression serious. But listen, you need to prepare yourself. Tomorrow, when the board meets, Laura's going to be exposed. She may turn on Marcus, she may try to play the victim, or she may lash out at you. Whatever she does, you have to stay calm. This is about the truth, not revenge. Her words echoed in my head as Friday arrived. The board meeting was held in the charity's main office, a glass-fronted building downtown. The conference room was sleek and modern, with a long table surrounded by leather chairs. As I walked in, I felt dozens of eyes on me, trustees, staff, auditors. And then, across the table, Laura. She looked immaculate, as always. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted nervously from face to face, her composure cracking at the edges. The meeting began with the auditors presenting their findings. Slide after slide displayed numbers, charts, and documents. Over the past 2 years, the lead auditor said, $127,450 has been diverted to a shell company called Cedarwood Holdings. The payments were authorized by Ms. Laura Bennett. Gasps filled the room. Whispers broke out. Laura sat frozen, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The chairwoman turned to her. "Ms. Bennet, do you have an explanation?" Laura opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, she looked small, cornered. Finally, she said, "It wasn't me. I was misled. Marcus, he told me it was legitimate. I thought it was part of a donor fund. I never intended." But the auditors cut her off. "We have copies of checks signed in your name. Bank transfers initiated from your accounts. Meeting records with Mr. Halloway." The room fell silent. And then, all at once, Laura's composure shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she broke into sobs. "He made me do it. I didn't know what else to do. I thought we were building something together." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Some looked sympathetic, others skeptical. I sat quietly, my hands folded, watching the unraveling. I hadn't come here to gloat or to rage. I had come for the truth, and here it was, laid bare for everyone to see. The chairwoman finally spoke. "Ms. Bennet, regardless of your claims, the evidence is clear. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending further investigation. Law enforcement will be notified." Laura's sobs filled the room. But no one reached out to comfort her. As the meeting adjourned, I stood to leave. Laura's eyes met mine across the table. For a moment, I saw something in her gaze, not love, not anger, but pure devastation. And in that moment, I realized the truth: she had never thought I would go this far. She had counted on my silence, on the remnants of our history to protect her. But I had chosen differently. As I walked out of the building, the sunlight hit my face, and I felt lighter than I had in years. This wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't even about Laura anymore. It was about finally freeing myself from the shadows of her secrets. And though the scandal was only beginning, though the headlines would soon follow, I knew one thing for certain: when people heard how I had handled it, they would be left speechless. The next few weeks felt like I was living in two different worlds. On the surface, everything looked normal. I went to work, I met with friends, I visited my parents every Sunday for dinner. But inside, my mind was constantly replaying the images, the words, the sounds from the hidden truth I had discovered about Emily. It was exhausting, but I didn't allow myself to fall apart. Instead, I decided to focus on myself. I joined a gym near my office, not because I wanted revenge or to look better for her, but because I needed to release all the anger and energy that was trapped inside me. Every push-up, every mile on the treadmill, every drop of sweat felt like a piece of pain leaving my body. My friends noticed the change in me. "Man, you're looking good these days," one of them said as we grabbed lunch together. I smiled, but inside, I knew it wasn't about appearances, it was about survival. But even as I pushed forward, I couldn't stop thinking about what to do next. I had all this information, screenshots, videos, recordings, evidence that could ruin Emily's reputation in a second. Part of me wanted to expose her, to show everyone who she really was. But another part of me hesitated. Would it really make me feel better? Or would it just drag me further into the mud? One evening, as I was sorting through the files on my laptop, I noticed something I hadn't paid much attention to before. A pattern. A date. A location. Emily's meetings with her lover weren't random, they were carefully planned around important events in my life. When I had an important presentation at work, she was busy that evening. When my dad had surgery, and I stayed overnight at the hospital, she couldn't come because she had a work emergency. And the night of my birthday, when she said she was visiting her sister, she was with him. Realizing this made my blood run cold. It wasn't just betrayal, it was intentional neglect. She had chosen him over me during the moments I needed her the most. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, the anger inside me growing hotter and hotter. I knew then that I couldn't stay silent forever. But instead of rushing into action, I did something unexpected. I called Emily. "Can we meet?" I asked calmly. There was a pause before she replied, sure. Why? Just to talk. One last time. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe we used to visit often. When I walked in, she was already there, looking nervous. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back, but I could see the guilt written all over her face. "Thanks for coming," I said, sitting across from her. She gave me a weak smile. "Of course. I wasn't sure if you'd ever want to see me again." I looked at her for a long moment. "Emily, I know everything. The messages. The recordings. The meetings. All of it." Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth but no words came out. Finally, she whispered, "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I replied. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't even know how to explain." "Don't," I cut her off. "I don't need explanations. What I want is honesty. Tell me, was any part of our marriage real? Or was it all a lie?" She covered her face with her hands, shaking her head. "It was real. I swear. I loved you. I made a mistake." I laughed bitterly. "A mistake? Emily, forgetting to buy milk is a mistake. Cheating for months, lying to my face, abandoning me when I needed you most, that's not a mistake. That's a choice." The cafe was quiet, and for a moment, all I could hear was her soft sobbing. I felt people glancing at us, but I didn't care. This wasn't about them, it was about finally confronting the truth. "Do you love him?" I asked flatly. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, she said, "I thought I did. But now, I don't even know anymore." I nodded slowly. "Well, at least we're being honest now." For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavy, but also strangely liberating. I realized that I no longer wanted her back, no longer felt the same pain I did when I first discovered the truth. Instead, I felt something else, power. I leaned forward. "Emily, I'm not going to expose you. I could, but I won't. Because your life is yours to deal with. But I want you to know this, what you did to me, what you destroyed, will never leave me. And someday, you'll feel the weight of it too." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "I already do." When I left that cafe, I felt lighter. Not because everything was magically fixed, but because I had faced her, told her the truth, and walked away without letting her break me again. That night, as I drove home, I made a decision. I wouldn't live my life trying to hurt her back or waiting for her to suffer. Instead, I would build something so strong, so unshakable, that her betrayal would look small in comparison. The way I would handle this, would leave everyone speechless. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. The weight of confrontation was gone. Emily knew that I knew, and I had said everything I needed to say. There was nothing left to linger in the shadows. But now came the bigger question, what was I going to do with my life? For years, my identity had been tied to her. Emily and I. Every event, every family gathering, every trip, we were a unit. Now, I was just me. And strangely, that thought wasn't as terrifying as it had been before. I started small. I changed my routine. Instead of dragging myself out of bed at the last minute before work, I woke up early and went for a jog. The crisp morning air hit my lungs like a reset button. Neighbors I had barely spoken to waved at me as I passed by, and for the first time, I felt connected to the world again. At work, people noticed too. My boss pulled me aside after a meeting. "You seem different these days, focused. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." It was strange how quickly life began to shift when I stopped drowning in anger. But I wasn't done yet. Deep down, I knew I wanted more than just surviving, I wanted to thrive. I wanted to build a life so meaningful that Emily's betrayal would fade into just another chapter of my story. So, I started taking risks. I signed up for a public speaking workshop, something I had always been afraid of. The first time I stood in front of a room full of strangers, my hands shook, my voice cracked, but I pushed through. By the third class, I was telling stories, making people laugh, even inspiring them. And each time, I thought, Emily never believed I could do this. She underestimated me. One weekend, I visited my parents, who had been quietly supportive through everything. Over dinner, my mother said something that stuck with me. "You know, maybe this wasn't the end, son. Maybe it was just the beginning." At first, I brushed it off as something people say to make you feel better. But later that night, lying in my old bedroom, I thought about it again. Maybe she was right. Maybe Emily's betrayal wasn't just destruction, it was also opportunity. Opportunity to grow. To rediscover myself. To finally stop living in someone else's shadow. Still, there was one thing left unresolved, the evidence. The files, the recordings, the screenshots. They sat in a folder on my computer like a ticking bomb. One evening, as I stared at the folder, I asked myself, what do I want out of this? Revenge? No. That would only tie me to her pain forever. Closure? Maybe. But I already had that. Then what? And then it hit me. I didn't want to use the evidence to hurt Emily. I wanted to use the experience to help myself, and maybe even help others. So, I started writing. At first, just notes. Snippets of feelings. Memories. Lessons. Slowly, it grew into something bigger, a story. Not just about betrayal, but about resilience, self-worth, and starting over. I didn't use names, I didn't point fingers. Instead, I focused on what it felt like to lose everything, and what it took to rebuild. Writing became therapy. Each word was like a brick laid in the foundation of a new life. When I shared the first draft with a close friend, he stared at me wide-eyed. "Man, this is powerful. You need to publish this." I laughed it off, but the idea stuck. In the weeks that followed, I polished my writing, sent it to a few blogs, and to my surprise, one of them published it. The response was overwhelming. People from all over wrote to me, saying they saw themselves in my story, that it gave them hope. I realized then that Emily's betrayal hadn't just broken me, it had given me a voice. But life has a funny way of testing you. Just as things were starting to look brighter, I received a message out of nowhere. It was from Emily. She wrote, "I read your article. I know it's about us. I don't know if I have the right to say this, but I'm proud of you." I stared at the message for a long time. For a moment, the old anger bubbled up. Proud? The same woman who tore me apart now wanted to pat me on the back. But instead of replying in anger, I closed my phone and smiled to myself. Because her words didn't matter anymore. What mattered was how far I had come. From that moment, I knew the way I had chosen to handle this, by rising above, by transforming pain into purpose, was the right path. And as I looked in the mirror that night, stronger, calmer, and more certain than ever, I whispered to myself. She thought she broke me. But she just set me free. The days turned into weeks, and life began to take on a rhythm I hadn't experienced in years. My mornings started with clarity instead of chaos. My evenings were filled with purpose rather than loneliness. And for the first time, I didn't feel like half of something, I felt whole on my own. One night, after finishing a chapter of what had now become a full-length memoir, I sat back and thought about the journey I had taken. The man who had first discovered Emily's secret was broken, humiliated, and angry. The man I had become was wiser, stronger, and strangely, grateful. Yes, grateful. Not for the betrayal itself, never that, but for what it forced me to do, to look inward, to rebuild, to grow into someone I never thought I could be. The real turning point came when the memoir was finally published as a book. I had worked tirelessly, pouring every ounce of emotion and every lesson I had learned into those pages. When the first box of copies arrived, I held one in my hands and felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The book didn't just tell my story, it told the story of countless others who had been betrayed, abandoned, or underestimated. And it didn't end with bitterness, it ended with triumph. When I held a small signing event at a local bookstore, I wasn't sure if anyone would show up. But the line stretched out the door. People came not just to buy the book, but to share their own experiences, their own battles. Many cried as they hugged me, thanking me for giving them hope. In that moment, I realized something extraordinary, my private pain had become a public purpose. And yes, word spread. Friends of Emily heard about the book. Even mutual acquaintances reached out to say they had read it. I knew it was only a matter of time before Emily herself got her hands on a copy. When she finally did, she sent me another message. This time, it wasn't just a few words, it was long, emotional. She admitted her mistakes, admitted the affair, admitted the lies. She confessed that she thought I would either break or become consumed with revenge. She never imagined I'd rise above it. Her final words were the most haunting. You handled this with more strength than I ever could have. And for that, I will always respect you. I read the message twice, then 3 times. And then I closed it and never replied. Not out of anger. Not out of bitterness. But because I didn't need to. Her validation, her confession, it didn't matter anymore. I had already moved on. My silence was my answer. Weeks later, I was invited to speak at a local conference about resilience and personal growth. Standing on stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, I told my story, not of Emily, not of betrayal, but of transformation. I spoke about what it meant to lose yourself in someone else, and then find yourself again in the ruins. I spoke about the power of choosing not to let betrayal define you, but to let it refine you. When I finished, the audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous. And for a moment, I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. I wasn't the man who had been betrayed anymore. I was the man who had survived, who had grown, who had found meaning in the wreckage. Later that night, I stood outside under the stars, breathing in the cool air, and thought about how far I had come. Emily's secret could have destroyed me. And maybe, for a while, it did. But in the end, it gave me the chance to become something greater. The way I handled it, by refusing to sink into hate, by choosing to rise, by turning pain into purpose, left people speechless. Not because I had done something flashy or dramatic, but because I had done something simple, and yet so rare, I had chosen peace over vengeance. And as I walked back inside, smiling to myself, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. The story of my life didn't end with Emily's betrayal. It began with it.